WASD movement schemes should be implemented for Diablo 4. This is such a huge feature that, yeah, I'm going to make a video about it because I think that this will genuinely increase the accessibility and enjoyment of this game for so many people. Even I myself had fun when I cracked up Diablo Immortal, and it has WASD movement schemes on PC, and we're talking about Diablo Immortal unironically here. It already has this scheme though, and I'll throw in some gameplay that has that in the background for a bit. Currently, the only option that we have is full mouse control, and those WASD keys, I cannot tell you how many times and I'm not alone in this, which made me feel good, but how many times in the beta I unintentionally pressed them to open menus when I was meant to move. Now hear me out, I'm not complaining just for my sake. It doesn't really bother me personally all that much because I have an unfortunately quite excessive and glamorous history with League of Legends, and I avoid talking about it like the well, you know. But you know who it really does bother? A lot of different people from a ton of different demographics, and it bothers them quite a lot to the point where they might just not play the game. People have arthritis, carpal tunnel, slower reflexes. Some people are born with certain disabilities that makes it a little bit more difficult. Like heck, the sheer number of posts that I've seen across subreddits, forums, across YouTube comments, this subject is huge, but it doesn't have enough traction going with content creators, and so I'm adding my 2 doubloons here, and yes, it should totally have WASD movement added in before Diablo 4 is launched. Now, the pushback to this idea, I'm going to be honest with you guys, it was hard to find much pushback to people being like, no, don't add it. So take that is being very self-explanatory in and of itself. Not that many people feel that passionately about denying WASD, but it seems to revolve for those minority of people around the idea of the purity of the Diablo franchise and the fact that it didn't exist before. And instantly that should be ringing a lot of bells in people's minds. Like, if you come from any game, that probably rings bells, but I'm thinking like World of Warcraft in particular, with like, oh, the purity of our games. Like, imagine if the Alliance and the Horde was to ever play with one another, and now Blizzard is adding in the ability to join the same guild in World of Warcraft as people from the other faction. So yeah, I guess it didn't pass the purity test or something. I sure didn't. But let's address the idea that this is the purity of Diablo, not having WASD movement, that it just never existed before. Immediately debunked, because Diablo Immortal that I just played for a surprising amount of time just now before this video, it feels great. It made everything in the game smoother, and as a mobile phone game ported to a PC, I struggle to even imagine saying it, because I am by no means a fan of Diablo Immortal's monetization or whatsoever. I am a strong opponent to it. I should say by no circumstances ever should I be saying that a phone port to a PC game felt good, but it did. So huge props to the developers. You somehow pulled off what I would have imagined was a nightmare to do. Other supposed arguments against adding WASD movement were concerns about making the game easier for people, which I find a bit obtuse, because if your idea of making a game harder is if a person can click between mobs to path and then click on the same mob to attack it, then click around it to path and then click on it like 5 times in a second, I don't find that genuine difficulty. I find that's adding tedium to the game. Input controls should not be a barrier to entry. It should not be the thing that makes it difficult. And most people, in general, seem to agree with it, so it's likely that I'm preaching to the choir. Say that you had a disability that made it hard to do that. WASD, I can tell you, would probably be infinitely easier to navigate and control. And for myself, as someone who is thankfully young, still spry, and still able to do amazing things with my reflexes, even I flat out would prefer WASD movement because of the ridiculously large amount of gaming experience across Final Fantasy XIV and other games. Like, Diablo Immortal felt comfortable to me. It's not clickbait, that's just literally what I had a good experience with. Now the truth is, this feature is so important that it probably might make or break Diablo 4 for a lot of people. Many people who come, say, from my channel where Final Fantasy XIV is my core content and always will be, like, hey, this game has no WASD, and so I hate the controls, and so I'm not going to play Diablo 4, so stop covering it and all that stuff. With the free weekend, some people are just going to be turned off. And that's crappy for a brand new game to hear that their denial of basic controls is what is discouraging people. It's not the story, it's not the gameplay, it's not the classes, it's just the controls. That that sucks. Like, it should not be that way. I should say that I'm not like harping on the game. I think that there's a lot of unnecessary negative feedback about a game that we haven't even seen close to the end game about. Like, as someone who is thankfully still young, still has good reflexes, and is still relatively spry, like I said before, the beta weekend was a ton of fun. And to hear me out when I say this, we don't know the end game, so who knows if the builds are great, or what the Paragon system is actually going to do, or what items may drop. Like, look at this bad boy here. This axe does some absolutely amazingly cool, badass legendary effects. Like, this is one of the most badass item effects I've ever seen. So, like, bro, this is sick. So my criticisms in other areas like builds would just sound preemptive and frankly stupid at this point to anyone who actually had the note. They'd be like, that feedback's going right into the garbage because he doesn't know shit. So yes, I think the game systems at level 25 are not enough, and the skill twigs are super disappointing. And yes, I did say twigs, but we know little else. Dungeons are based on tile sets. I also play Warframe. I'm not worried about dungeons in Diablo 4 at all. If your problems are adding more tile sets, you are in a freaking fantastic situation, because that is so much easier to do. Class balance, well, frankly, I disagree with people, even if they do have more clout and experience in this genre than me. I generally actually don't like ARPGs, but say if you buff the Barbarian, I really like the Barbarian, and I'll have a hard time not running it because I was chilling having a blast face tanking. If it's buffed, I don't even know how crazy that'll be. But in conclusion, because this isn't a video on all that, is WASD is something I think is necessary for this game, and I really did enjoy the beta. I want to see it, and I really want to truly see as many people get involved as possible, and so I'm making this video and adding my 2 doubloons onto the pile. So please, D4 devs, if you somehow come across this video, I know it's super unlikely, please make WASD movement in Diablo 4 a thing, please.